Hey everyone, welcome to the 409th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patron Alex Schwartz. Check out his website. He's a filmmaker, R.A. Schwartz, SCHWARTZ.com. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today we've got a rerun episode, which is pretty rare.
Do you listen to rerun episodes?
Yeah, I will. For sure.
We've never done a rerun episode, but Script Notes, which I listen to periodically, does a lot of them.
Decoder Ring will do that as well. Like popular episodes that really hit, or in our case, I think one from the archives that is pretty old. If you're a new listener, you probably haven't heard it unless you really dug deep back.
Back from 2020, so post-COVID starting.
Sure. Different era, a lifetime ago it feels. But Warren, why are we rerunning an episode?
Well, I think one of the things that is evident from our podcast, though we never really spell it out. We talk about community a lot. We have a film community, but really like our careers are based largely on like relationships we have. And we actually recorded a new episode that was supposed to come out today that was like set up to come out.
And edited.
Thumbnails might or might not have been made. I don't know.
Posted. Yeah, it was ready to go.
But basically, I've kind of come off of a long string of really fun, great productions. And I hadn't talked to Matt in a while, and I just kind of thought it was a good time to like vent about every issue I had with every production. And last night, coming off of another production, I was thinking to myself, why am I venting about these like amazing opportunities I had? Everything went really well, and me just kind of making a podcast episode about like the various challenges I faced seemed like a conversation I would have with you, but not on a podcast. And I have relationships with all these people that I'm making things with, and I want everyone to realize that we're positive and excited about things. And I think, I was venting, you were venting. And in my mind, I thought if somebody that we know listens to this episode, it might sound like we're just complaining a lot. And we did get, an Instagram message recently from a listener that said he thought we complained a little bit too much on one of our episodes. So we thought, let's run an old episode that we both really liked. It's director Amanda Rowe. She was a co-EP on the Nancy Drew Show. She's a TV director. Do you remember that episode well? Because there's one moment I really, really liked from that episode. Can you guess what it was?
I have a guess.
What's your guess?
There's an anecdote from the story where she went out and like shot a film kind of off the cuff that ended up breaking her into her whole career. Like she just shot it out in the woods, I think maybe solo, and used some kind of experimental effects, basically like stuff through glass and, maybe some lens whacking, stuff like that. And that's what
got her launched.
What launched her, yeah.
So that was cool, but no, my favorite part was the fish story. She had read a screenplay that described a fish doing a very specific thing, and I was like, how on earth can you get that shot?
Yeah.
And she explains exactly how she did it, and it's like the stupidest, best way you can do it.
Duh, of course, that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we're going to replay that. It's Amanda Rowe. It's a really fun interview with a TV director that's just like really smart and rational and logical and resourceful. And I think it's fun. I also want to mention a producer that both you and I have worked on. I just worked with her recently, Alexandra Henry. She's been on the podcast. She's also a filmmaker. She made a movie called Street Heroines about graffiti writing all over the world. And it just came out. It's on Amazon Prime. You should check it out. Street Heroines. It's really cool, and she's really cool. And, Matt and I would love to work with her again.
Shout out. Hi, Alex. How you doing? But before we get into our conversation with Amanda Rowe, we have one final piece of housekeeping, and that's patreon.com/justshootitpod, which is the place where if you find some value in the show, you can throw us a buck or two.
Do you feel like the way you segued into that, where you pause and then you go patreon.com/justshootitpod, people might think we're just editing a rehearsed Patreon chunk into the episode?
I think that if you listen to how poorly constructed the Patreon plugs are, there's no way you would think that we had scripted them or constructed them for...
That they're just dropped in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. This is sloppy enough. No one in their right mind would decide to do it this way.
Yeah. I try to make them a little sloppy just so people know they're bespoke to each episode.
Shaggy, I think, is what people like to say.
Shaggy.
But I'm sure you've noticed that we're starting to plug people at the top of the episodes, not just saying their names, but also plugging a website or something like that. It's just a small way that we can say thank you to all of our subscribers and listeners and the people who help keep the show alive. So if you would like to have your name said at the top of an episode, shout it out,
with the website,
Instagram handle, that sort of stuff. Let us know, and you can go to patreon.com/justshootitpod. Drop us a line, and we'd be happy to do that at any tier, any level.
And even if you are already a patron, send us a message, and we will plug your site if we haven't done it already. So thanks again to our patrons. You keep us going. And without further ado, let's get into it. Here's Amanda Rowe. In the film timeline that we're used to of people spending hundreds of years trying to get their first paid gig, you've had a pretty meteoric rise, right? You're like a co-EP on a TV show. Now you just graduated film school 9 years ago, which is recent in Hollywood time. How did you do it?
I fell ass backwards into it. I can only attribute it all to the fact that I have just been making shit since I was a kid. And the short film that got me my first job in television was one of probably 24 little short films I made that year. I made it for $50 in an afternoon. It was 3 minutes long. And for whatever reason, people really loved it. And I mean, my philosophy at the time, and to this day still, is just like throw enough shit at the wall, like something will stick. You know, you're going to make mistakes along the way, but all of those mistakes are lessons, and you become a better filmmaker for doing it.
Can you tell us about that short?
Yeah, we got to dig in on the short for sure.
Like, what's a $50 short that gets you a TV gig? I'm going to write this down.
Well, it had a good twist. I mean, I don't want to, like, I don't honestly know why this one of all of the little shorts I'd made, it turned into what I did. I mean, the actual logistics of what happened were that little short film ended up in a bunch of film festivals all over the world.
Can you just give us the log line?
Mitten, I can't, it's like 3 minutes. It's a guy is walking through the woods and he finds a mitten covered in blood, and then something happens in the end.
I like it.
Like, I can't, like, it kind of ruins it if I tell you.
But it's a 3 minute short. Come on, you can't ruin it on a podcast. We're talking about, you've done all this TV. You directed the 100, for crying out loud. You can't tell us, you can't spoil a 3 minute short.
So it's
you
just
can
not,
say no,
it's
by
not,
the way. Sorry,
it's just
I don't mean to
not
pressure
going to be as good if I tell you what the ending is. The whole thing is that you just see a guy walking through the woods. You don't know, he finds a mitten and it's covered in blood, and he seems really fascinated with it, and seems to have some sort of weird, like, you know, like he's afraid because there's a little child's mitten covered in blood. And I'll just ruin it, whatever. At the end of the film, he walks towards this big tree and there's a big pile of leaves, and he starts digging through the leaves, and a human hand is there. And then he puts the mitten on, and he goes...
The hand that matches the glove.
And then he goes, "I found your mitten, sweetheart." And that's it.
Oh.
That's yeah.
Creepy. That's good. That's so good. So I want to keep digging in, though. So when you say a bunch of film festivals, are we talking the big fancy ones we've all heard of, or like a lot of great regional ones? What was the biggest festival you played?
The one that got me my job in TV was the After Dark Festival in Toronto. Although I was in, like, because I was like a little 3 minute short film, here's advice to young filmmakers out there. Make 1 to 5 minute short films, because festivals are just looking into fill in slots and make that time work. And my film was 3 minutes long. So in a lot of horror festivals all over the world, and a lot of film festivals, they were like, perfect, this is good, it'll fit right in there. And so I ended up...
Or you can even play it before a feature, right? Like
Absolutely. They're just looking for stuff to fill in that time slot. Like, it's a lot easier. And another really fucking good piece of advice, sorry, I'm swearing already. A good piece of advice.
You're a genre director, you can swear, you know.
Yeah, hell yes. If you make a little tiny short film that's 1 to 5 minutes long, email the festival directors directly and say, look, I can't really afford the admission fee. Can you watch, is there anything you can do? Chances are they'll watch your 3 minute film, and if it's good, they'll say, yeah, no problem, fine. You can be a part of it.
That's great advice we haven't heard on the show before.
Yeah,
like, no one ever talks about waivers. That's
you could literally, say, it will take you longer to respond to me than to watch this film, right?
Absolutely. And that's how I got, Mitten, the name of the film is Mitten, obviously, which was actually, it was originally a contest submission because the ABCs of Death, I don't know if you guys know those films, the horror anthology films, every time they did a movie, they would release a letter to the public and be like, okay, it's the letter C and you have to come up with something. So the letter was M. And it was just like, I was constantly entering these contests. I was constantly constantly, just because it gave me limitations, it gave me rules to work within. That was fun. And I love doing it. And like I said, my philosophy has always been throw enough shit against the wall. Something will be good eventually.
I love that so much. Tell us, in terms of scope and size, right? You're throwing a lot of spaghetti against the wall. Do you have a crew? Is it like you and your film school pals? Is it like you alone in the woods? What sort of, is it an iPhone? Does your
DSLR.
uncle own an Alexa?
Alexa.
Well, it depends.
Paint the picture.
It depends on the project. It always depends on the project, depends on the people I'm talking to at the time. I 1,000% believe you can shoot something beautiful on an iPhone. I think you can shoot something on like a high 8 tape and make it amazing, just if your idea and your intention is great. Mitten I made with 4 people. It was like, I'm not kidding, it was literally an afternoon. It did not seem like a big deal, but it ended up really like significantly changing my life.
Wait, but did you have to dig a giant hole under this tree in order to get the person's arm to be sticking out of
No, what we did, I literally, it was fall, so we like
We've
piled
never
a bunch
heard
of
of that here
leaves,
in
and
California,
I was in Toronto. It was
Right.
fall in Toronto.
I'm saying we don't have that here, but yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I lived in California for a while, and I resent that.
Sorry.
But we like did a pile, we just like built a big pile of leaves, and then had a wonderful volunteer put her hand through the leaves and hold it very still while she was getting eaten alive by, late summer mosquitoes. But it was very, very, very small, very just sort of like, well, I'm going to do this thing. I don't know, whatever. It'll be fun using the resources I have. I grew up making movies when I was 10. I started like just working with what I had. And even as a television director now, working on shows where like I've got $11 million, I still have that sort of backyard filmmaking mentality. And it's extraordinarily useful.
So I want to learn more about how you take that mentality with you into television. But before we get into that, I have a couple tiny more questions about Mitten and what happened afterwards. So Mitten, you don't have big auspices for it. You make it on a lark. It turns out it's good, right? And it's like playing a lot of places. What I want to know is after it starts building steam, right? And you said it changed your life. How did people reach out to you? How did they see it through the film festival? Tell us literally, did you get a phone call? Was it an email? And from whom?
My guess is somebody called you and they're like, we've got a movie, an M movie. We're looking for an M director.
Yeah.
No, it's actually like it's actually pretty cool. So Netflix at the time was doing their very first original series.
They were called Metflix back then. That makes sense.
But it was called Hemlock Grove. It was a horror series produced by Eli Roth. This was Netflix's first foray into television.
Yeah, it's like House of Cards hadn't come out yet even. Yeah,
Yep,
it was like
this
really,
is
really
way
early. That's
back.
right.
It was like
Yeah,
2012. This is like way, way back.
Yeah.
And the producer-director of that series, David Straighton, saw my film and saw that I had made it for $50. And at the
Where
time...
did he see your film? Like at a festival?
After Dark Film Festival.
Okay. And that's the Lionsgate one, right? Or it used to be connected to them, no?
I have no idea. After Dark, it's Toronto After Dark. All I know is it's a Toronto horror festival that I'm loyal to every year since I was like 16. But so he saw my film and then he read my blurb where it said I made it for $50 in an afternoon. And he had at the time been trying to convince Netflix that he needed one director to do all of these nightmares, because in season 2 of Hemlock Grove, every single episode had a nightmare. And at the end of the season, you find out that all these nightmares are coming from a singular source. And he didn't want a bunch of guest directors coming in and putting their spin on these nightmares. He wanted one director to do all the nightmares. And he was trying
That
to
would
convince...
be intercut into each episode.
Exactly. And he was trying to convince Netflix to hire a unit for that. And they were like, nah, bro, you're like super insane. That's crazy expensive. We can't do that. And then he saw what I did for $50. And I still to this day don't know why he had such blind faith in me. But he was like, this girl, she can do it. She can make something cool for $50. And I was invited into a room full of producers. And I'm pretty sure I was wearing overalls, which is hilarious. I looked very, like, when I think I was 22 years old or 23 years old. Like, I looked very, very young. I probably looked 15. And they were like, who the hell is this child? Like, what is happening? And they gave me a page of script and they gave me a camera and they basically were like, all right, make us a nightmare. And so I did, and I made it in my backyard.
So they wrote something for you.
No, it was already written. It was already this is the nightmare. This is what's going to happen. And this is the thing. They were all these sort of supposed to be these abstracted, dreamlike images. But essentially, because I had already been doing this for so long by myself, I had a bunch of like tricks, like passing a piece of like broken glass in front of the lens, or like I already, like, my brain worked that way. And a perfect example of it is there was one line in the script that was a fish is gasping for air at the edge of a dry riverbed, and I got that shot, and the producer director, like, so basically after I submitted it, like, Eli Roth, everyone was like, this is great, we need more of this. And like that day,
how do you get a fish to gasp for air?
I literally bought a fish at the grocery store and added like fishing line to its mouth and used it like a puppet.
Fish?
A dead fish.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Like a grocery, it cost me like $6, and I just like used it like a puppet. And it was so funny because the producer director was just like, oh God, how did you do it? Like, we've been dealing with this shot for so long. Like, PETA was going to get involved. And like, I was like, dude, like, I just bought a grocery store fish, and it's because their minds
No animals were harmed.
No animals.
They're already
not
dead.
by me.
Yeah.
Not by me. I didn't do it. But it was just this, because they're so used to the bureaucracy and the rules and having to spend this much money, the idea of going to the grocery store and using a piece of fishing line on an already dead fish just never occurred to them. So
that is legitimately crazy. That's bonkers.
And I think it's respectful that you used fishing line instead of any other sort of wire.
Yeah.
Well, we call it monofilament in the biz for some reason
Yeah,
to make it sound fancy. I don't know.
Yeah. So a producer doesn't like, we don't need fishing line. Get rid of that.
Wait, so just in this story, so you don't have like a production designer, an art person, or anything that you lean on?
I had a crew of probably 9 people. And I really got to do like film school filmmaking on this set. Like, I just got to be creative. We got to like experiment with like, dude, like I did like these nightmares for Hemlock Grove. And then after that, I got hired to do like the murder visions for Minority Report. So I was in this like really weird niche of like, this girl knows how to create bizarre imagery
Crazy.
for nothing. And like, we just experimented. Like, we did like, here, like, one really cool shot that I love to talk about is the dream was a guy was going to fall off a bridge and drown, right? So how do we express that visually? We put basically a piece of plastic or a piece of glass in front of the lens and poured a water bottle all over the front of it, shot it at 200 frames a second, and had a guy silhouetted against a white cyc jumping off of a trampoline and then like falling. And then as the water fell, his silhouette just turned into this sort of fluid, watery thing. Like, and it was just this sort of like, I don't know what that'll look like. Let's try it. And I got to do so much of that on the show and so much of that on Minority Report. Like, I learned so many cool, easy, interesting tricks in terms of...
Wait, did you ever shoot stuff that you're like, nah, that doesn't look like anything interesting?
Oh, absolutely, all the time. But that's why you just do, like I said, just do everything.
So they kind of let you play. I mean, I'm assuming now when you're doing a show like The 100 or Nancy Drew, you don't get to try out like 10 different things, right?
No, I don't get to try out 10 different things, but I definitely do try things. I mean, if anything, like, television for me is a amazing playground where I get to experiment and I get to use the toys, and you have to be smart about the choices you make. I'm not going to go do something that's, especially because it's not my money in it. It's not my show. I have to be a little bit careful about the risks I take, but it's calculated risks.
Well, and I imagine if you had a crazy idea, you could maybe do the lo-fi prototype on the weekend or whatever, just to see if it would work before you wanted to prove it to someone or something, right? For
sure. We test stuff and but I mean, honestly, just like trusting your gut, like when you think like, you know what, this might work, like it usually does.
Going back to the mode where you're in this kind of nightmare creation sort of world, are you doing much digitally or in post, or is it all kind of these in-camera tricks that you're experimenting with?
Everything I did on Hemlock Grove and Minority Report was in camera.
Mm-hmm.
We did everything in camera.
Yeah, that's
and
pretty
I'm
cool.
Still, and
right?
I still love in camera stuff. Like there's something, I love magic. Like I'm super, I want to be a member of the Magic Castle.
It's a great card game.
I'm also super into Magic Gathering. I play a lot of Magic Gathering.
Well,
yeah.
insult failed.
No, it's a great game. But no, I'm into like actual, like, I mean, the first guy to do special effects ever was George Méliès. That was like, what, 1904? He was a magician.
Right.
There's no difference between special effects and being a magician. And I love that stuff.
Well, magic is real is the difference, but yeah.
I think that the movie magic is when the person in the audience doesn't know how it was done.
Do you find that the practical applications rather than digital make them feel different in some way?
I think that I can talk all day about VFX, and I love VFX. VFX is a color on your palette. It's not the end all be all. Like it sort of in the early 2000s, it sort of turned into this thing. We all saw these really depressing images of George Lucas against green screens versus him against all of his puppets and stuff. And it was like really sad. But I actually, my thesis film in film school was an homage to practical effects, because when I was in film school, The Red One came out, Avatar came out, and I felt like the film that I had learned to love had been sort of disintegrating. And my film school teacher said to me, Amanda, you're a genre director. If you're in genre, you have to move with the way the industry is going. And he introduced me to Steve Spaz Williams, who invented VFX. He did the VFX for Jurassic Park, Terminator, The Abyss, all that shit. And I got to sit down and have dinner with this guy. And he really explained to me how when he did these films, he did them by himself. Like, he didn't have a program filling in the blanks. He didn't have the zeros and ones being filled in. He had to build these elements from clay. I could talk for hours about this shit he told me, but you should probably just talk to him. But he essentially taught me that, and he said, I have faith that the film industry will understand that VFX isn't it. It's a part of it. It's just like George Méliès compositing. It's no different than we did in 1904. It's the same philosophy, except instead of using scissors and tape, we're using a computer program. And it's like a VFX shot does not work unless you have interactive lighting, interactive action, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's just a part of it. It's not the end all be all, but it's an amazing tool that keeps evolving, that is making television and film so exciting and awesome, and we're just getting more tools as we go.
Yeah. I mean, any VFX person you ever meet will tell you that the more you can do in camera, the better. So do you join the DGA and stuff when you're doing these nightmare videos?
So I didn't join the DGA, I joined the DGC, so the Directors Guild of Canada, which is, it exists, it's a thing.
Never even thought of that.
I know, we exist. I'm DGA now as well as DGC. At the time, I was, like I said, super young, fell ass backwards into it, tons and tons of luck on my side. And I literally, I got the job, and they were like, I needed to be a member of the union, so I called up the DGC, and they're like, I was like, I'm on this show called Hemlock Grove, and they're like, all right, here's your membership. Whereas, most of the time you got to, build up a certain amount of hours and get sponsors and all that kind of stuff. I didn't have to do that. But I did have to, the first time I was ever on a television set, I was directing, and that was a real learning curve. And I wasn't just directing nightmare units, which were my very comfortable film school 9 people. I was also directing full on second units on a TV show where I had a crew of 100 people. And I vividly remember my first time on set. I was directing, it was like a news piece. It was supposed to be playing on a TV in the background of an episode, but I had 3 picture cars, 30 background. I had a crane. I remember someone coming up to me and asking me something, and I was like, this isn't my first rodeo. But it was like very much my first rodeo. Like I had no idea what I was doing. Fake it till you make it is real.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we're tracking correctly. So you do Hemlock Grove, and then you do Minority Report, the TV show. So then the second you were doing was relatively soon thereafter, or like was there a gap of time in between? How did that go?
Oh, there was a major gap. I did season 2 and 3 of Hemlock Grove, and then
and is that like your full-time job? Like that's all you're doing is Hemlock Grove?
That was my full-time. Yeah, because it was every single episode, so it was like a kind of cool, unique situation where like they had a full-time second unit, special unit. Where that was my job. I did Hemlock.
And this is like 2012, right?
Yeah.
So 2012, that's way pre Me Too and all that stuff. Do you feel like as a female director, like that was a challenge for you? Like that people had low expectations or anything?
Everybody thought I was sleeping with somebody. It was funny because it like everyone asked me this question, but I was so out of my element that I didn't even allow myself to notice. I had people on the set who were so outwardly awful to me. And only in retrospect, when people told me afterwards, did I realize that that's what I had gone through. But I had just been so fixated on doing a good job that like I didn't notice and I didn't care.
But I assume you also must have been like really nice to people, right? Because I think that you see this happen a lot where like an independent filmmaker that's used to small crews is like really amazing at their job. And then they get this opportunity to work with the 9-person in that $1 million budget or the 100-person crew, the $11 million budget. And they are having trouble because people aren't letting them do what they're used to doing. And so to succeed, you have to get along with people, it seems like, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think, and I still am like that. I'm still very, very nice. I mean, filmmaking is it's a team thing. If I wanted to just do it myself, I'd paint a picture or write a book. Like this is a team-based medium. I love my crew. I love having all their perspectives, and I need to make them feel comfortable enough with me to be able to say, hey man, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And I need them to not be offended when I say no, so that the next time they come up with an idea, they can give it to me and not feel afraid of it. I mean, I am definitely very kind on set and nice on set. I mean, the other benefit of that is like when I'm not nice, you fucked up. It's like, whoa, like Amanda's mad. That must must have really fucked up.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, or just we don't have time to try, your crazy idea.
Sometimes we don't have time. I'll say thank you. That's a great idea, but no, we're not going to do that. But yes, I was and I am. I've always been a very nice person. I mean, I'm Canadian as well, which adds to
built
it.
in, yeah.
It's definitely built in. But on Hemlock Grove, and I'm fine saying this, like Hemlock Grove was like a very like masculine environment. It was a very masculine set, and I very much stood out like a sore thumb. Like everyone was like, what is she doing here? But I mean, we were making great things, and I had certain allies on the set that, were looking out for me and making sure that my stuff was, that I was being heard. And I have to thank those people as well for all of that. But I just didn't let it affect me.
Did you have any practical experiences where like someone did something that like helped you help bolster your voice in some way? Like what you said, that you had a handful of allies who really made sure that you were heard. Were there specific things or tactics that they used that you maybe use now when you need to like amplify someone else's voice or anything like that? Is there any like practical sort of technique to it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was working on one show where I had one shot in mind that I was trying to do, and it was a sort of a practical special effects shot. I had one way I wanted to shoot it, and the DP sort of kept talking, being like, oh, why don't we do it like this? And why don't we do it like this? And it kind of confused me because, he's the DP, he's been working for this long. Am I thinking the wrong thing? Like, I don't know. Like, that's something that, like, even still I have to battle with. Is like, does this person know more than me? Like, maybe I should be listening to them. But one of the art PAs literally came up and just said, like, wait, why don't you just listen to Amanda for a second? And then everyone took pause, and then I was able to explain exactly what I wanted to do. And then it was like, oh, okay. And then we did it, and it was great. And what that was for me was like, when I have an idea in the beginning and I'm confident about how it works, hold on to that idea. because you're going to get a million voices coming at you with how they can do it, how they think it should happen. One thing that you forget constantly as a director is nobody is inside of your head. Nobody is in your head. Sometimes you come up with a scene, you're like, well, obviously that's how it's shot. Obviously they see it
Why
like this,
bother
but it's
explaining?
not.
Because it should be apparent to everyone, right?
Exactly. But that's not the case. Everybody has their own unique mind, which is why we all work together. All their unique minds come together to make a beautiful product in the end. But ultimately, as the director, like, if you believe in something initially, you're probably right. Stick with it, and don't never in my career has someone said something that has made me doubt myself, that has made me change my mind, that I haven't regretted afterwards. I always regret not listening to my instincts.
Yeah, I am exactly the same way. And all of us have been doing this, between 10 and 20 years. And I'm still on set sometimes where like the DP will be like, why don't we just shoot it from here? It'll be way easier. It'll be better. It looks better. And you're like, yeah, it does look better. And then it would be easier. And then you're like, but wait, but my whole point of this shot is to see these two things together. And now you're trying to change everything. And it's also as to cut into this last, and you do find yourself sometimes fighting for yourself. We just talked to a directing duo yesterday, a couple that directs together. And that was one of the advantages they have, is they can back each other up and say, wait, but that wasn't our plan, and this is why. Because it's really easy, especially when you're younger and newer, to get derailed by the DP that's shot 30 years of TV.
Yeah. What's especially hard about it is that also it's not like you're always right? Your instincts are one thing, right? But then sometimes someone will bring up, a different solution, and your instincts will tell you, oh, that's what I should do. That's right. And that feels very similar to the thing that you're describing, Amanda, where someone has undermined your instincts and you're questioning it, right? Like, there's a difference between following your gut when there's a new option that seems great versus getting under your skin. And they feel so similar that it can be really hard and it complicates things.
They feel similar, but I ultimately think it's the same thing. It's the same thing as if somebody comes up to you with an idea and your gut tells you, that's good.
That's good. Go for it.
Go with your gut.
Yeah.
And like, that's what I was saying is, like, working in film, you want to hear everyone's ideas. You want to hear what Hair thinks. You want to hear what everyone thinks, because they're all looking at the monitor with a completely
Hair is
different...
always talking to me about how to light my shots. Damn it, Hair.
I had a really cool experience. Hair, the reason I said Hair actually specifically is because it kind of taught me a lesson. I was doing Shadowhunters, and Nancy Warren is the head of makeup and hair on that show. And I had this one scene with this guy. He's like hanging from chains, and he's looking like particularly angry. She came up to me and she was like, should we like spike his hair up? And I was like, well, I don't know. Didn't it look like this the last scene? Like, why would we spike his hair up? And she was like, well, when I did Wolverine's hair, and I was like, oh shit, okay. When I did Wolverine's hair, whenever
really
he was
liked it spiky.
well, whenever he was angry, she pointed all of his hair towards the front. So all of those lines from the eyebrows, all of that stuff going down, that all it turned to a point, and it just became a little nugget that we as the audience are subconsciously absorbing. And that to me was like, that moment to me was like, every single person on this set has a perspective that is valuable to telling that story.
Also, special effects makeup oftentimes looks best from a certain angle, right? In the same way that like stunts would be like, if you take a step to your left with the camera, it'll sell the punch better. Like, all of that stuff speaks together for sure.
All of it does. I mean, it is a collaborative medium, and you should be in film because you want that.
Well, so you did Hemlock Grove, then you did Minority Report, and then you jumped into Shadowhunters and Siren and Cloak and Dagger and all these kind of high budget, big set piece TV shows. I'm curious, you're one person. How much control do you have over, there's a scary guy in chains, like the wardrobe, the chains, like what everything looks like, the locations. Like, when you're working on such a big TV show with so many moving parts, how much is the director saying, like, oh, I think the chains should look like this, and I think the wardrobe should look like this? Or how much of it is, like, I guess, what are you focusing on as a TV director on these kind of big set piece shows that you have to shoot in probably 8 days or something?
Yeah, usually 8 days. It's always different. It's always like show to show. For me, the most important thing always is the story and the characters. Like, what is the story that I'm telling? Every show has rules. Even if those rules aren't written out or explained, you just sort of understand them via watching the show or just how the crew acts, what the network or the studio expects. There are shows that,
Right. What do you mean by the crew, how the crew acts? Like if they're kind of turned off by an idea of yours?
Well,
very excited about an idea?
Well, no. For example, I don't have any control over the lighting. I can say something like, I want it to be dark and moody, or I would like this to be blue, or I'd like this to be colder versus warmer. I would like to change.
You can say silhouette versus
yeah,
soft,
but like there's
soft
but
light.
if the show has a specific lighting style that I think is ugly, like I can't tell the DP we're changing
Which
it.
show is that? Which show is
I
that?
can,
What? Light as a feather?
I'm not
100?
telling you anything.
No, I'm just kidding.
But that's the thing. Like I have to. The way I always describe it, for at least with television, is it's a coloring book. They've given me the lines, and I can use whatever colors I want at whatever density I want, but I have to stay within those lines. And as a director in television, especially because I did not intend to be a television director. I write, I direct, I still have all the stuff that I have a voice as a filmmaker. It's about fitting within that coloring book and then doing it the way that you can do it within those lines. I think that because I've directed television for so long, since, literally like straight out of film school into TV, I've kind of learned how to embrace the limitations and love them, and I'm a little bit addicted to them. Like I like when like COVID, like I'm running a TV show during a pandemic, and I weirdly love it. Because I'm like, all right, we can only shoot this way once. We only get 2 takes.
Yeah. Like all the actors have to be 6 feet apart.
But it's
blow each other kisses, no mouth to mouth kisses.
It's like a boss level in a video game. It's like you think you know how to do this, but nah. Here's here's the next shit, and I love that. I find it invigorating, and it gives me more avenues to be creative. It's the engineering of it all, I guess.
I'm curious a little bit. You were mentioning the rules, and maybe some of them are unspoken. Are there other ways in which that they are communicated, or ways in which you pick up on said rules besides just watching the show or observing human behavior?
Yes. I mean, sometimes I will go in a show and I will have a producing director say, look, I'll actually give Nancy Drew as an example. Larry Tang, who was the producer director before me, first day I walked on set, he was like, we don't we like or less setups, more takes. Let's spend the time on making the performance great. And we have 7 main cast, right? So trying to get as many faces in that frame at once, and clever framing, let that camera move so that a 2-shot turns into a single, rather than coverage in 3 sizes. That rather than doing that on each actor, he had we don't like overs. We don't like overs unless they mean something. We like.
Wait, tell me what why do they not like?
We were
overs?
talking so much about overs lately. It's so funny that you bring.
Oh,
that up.
have you?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting, because I also at the beginning was like, why don't a lot of directors don't like overs? And I was like, why don't we like overs? It's because, and I've learned this since, especially after doing a bunch of stuff, that an over it's not a standard and shouldn't be treated as a standard. The over should have cinematic grounding. If I'm over someone's shoulder, that reminds me that I'm in a conversation with them, right? Whereas if I'm on a clean shot of someone, I'm in that person's head. I'm that person experiencing that situation versus that person standing with another person. It's about like, and like, how sometimes an over can just be like, it's a dirty, like, okay, you get a little bit of head here and shoulder here, that's fine. Maybe you've got more head and more shoulder, and the person is just over your shoulder, and that person is crazy intimidating. Like, I think the reason a lot of directors are kind of annoyed with overs is because it's a reflection of the 90s version of television, which we had, you're doing your master, you're doing this shot, and you're doing over, and that's how we cover it. And I think a lot of directors are just annoyed that that's the standard. It's not that the over is bad, it's that the over should have context.
Yeah, people also talk about close-ups, right? Like, I think there was a period of time where a close-up was an even more important piece of coverage, in that, like, that cutting to a close really meant something, whereas, like, mediums and wides were kind of where we were living a little bit more. But I think now that we're watching more and more things on smaller and smaller screens, I think a close is just part of the vocabulary in a way that it wasn't before.
I guess I personally, like, I don't like that. I love a close-up to mean something. Like, I love that if we're gonna be right there in the frame with someone's face, we earned that, and we're there for a reason, because a close-up can be so powerful, right? And letting, I love a 2-shot. I love a fucking 5-shot. Like, I love when I can see all the, like, I hate, like, just like cutting. And that's the thing, is when you're shooting overs, you're shooting coverage, what you're doing is you're restricting yourself to cutting. You can't just play the whole scene out. You have to cut. And cutting feels like something, and it's about sort of being a little bit nitpicky about the cinematic language, and making those choices intentionally. Not and if you're making choices because of efficiency, then make it a moving camera master. Make it something cool that makes you feel like you're in the scene. I think a lot of the whole over thing is just based on a lot of directors, especially older directors who worked in the 90s when TV got super popular and they were shooting, a bajillion episodes a month.
Right. And like Law and Order, you have a standard, right? You have a camera on a steady cam, a moving master, and then the 2 overs. And they can all shoot at the same time.
Exactly.
Right?
Like, what are you even doing there as a director other than saying action and cut?
Collecting a paycheck.
I mean, you're asking for a coffee.
Yeah.
And asking for
Or from what I've heard at the time, like a whiskey. Everyone's always like, back in the day.
Couple bumps.
Can you think of something worse than, like, directing with a mild buzz? Just feeling a little slow sounds so terrible to me.
I don't know. We've both directed in Kentucky, Matt, and I think you had a lot more whiskey.
I did, but not while we were rolling. That's for sure.
The worst is, and I've only ever done it once, and I was in film school, is directing while stoned.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't act while stoned. Don't prep while prep while stoned.
Sure.
That's fine.
Homework is different, right?
Homework is different.
We just talked to the DP of End of the Fucking World. Do you know that show?
Yes, I love that show.
And the way he discussed their rules for covering actors was he called it putting the camera inside the dialogue, as opposed to outside the dialogue, which is what made me think of when you're talking about, when the camera is between people, it's inside the conversation, and when it's behind people, it's outside of the conversation.
I think that's a much more articulate, beautiful way of putting it than I just did, but that is exactly it. Like, being clean on a character it's about that character, and not about them talking to that character. But sometimes it is about that. Sometimes it's about them pleading to the other character, and you want to be over that character so you feel that person there. It's just about, like, recognizing what the emotional beats are and then translating that through the camera.
But let me ask you, and I know in TV it's a little different because you are shooting so many people so fast, but would you rather have like a 3/4 angle clean shot instead of the over? Or I think part of the reason you shoot these overs is because you can shoot multiple angles at the same time that are maybe facing each other. If you want to do kind of clean frontal singles, it's hard to shoot both actors at the same time, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, give me a clean single and a profile on my other one. I love a hard profile.
And you don't mind cutting between those two?
Oh, it looks beautiful. It's totally fine. I mean, you don't have to necessarily be front on to shoot someone clean. You can just be over the shoulder of that person, keep them like separated enough. There's always 2 directions you can shoot from. And sometimes it's like, I mean, Sorry, I was incorrect. I'm not going to shoot the profile of the other actor. I'm going to shoot the profile of that actor and then their clean 3/4, and then the profile of the other actor and that 3/4 on that other side. And then I can cut
so that
those.
you can light them separately.
I light them separately, and then I can cut them back and forth whatever way I would like to.
Yeah, I like that also because then you're not, whenever I would try to do like overs as crosses, you're always in that zone where you're fighting the other camera, right? Like you don't want to accidentally be like, you have to compromise both shots that way basically if you're in crosses rather than stacked on one side or the other.
Yeah, I guess I've kind of like in my own brain gotten into a system now where, you know, if I'm shooting the face of one actor, you know, a camera's doing that. One thing I love, especially if I'm in tight mode, if I'm like right in there in that person's face, then I put like a 135 on my B camera, and we're getting your hands ringing. We're getting you like brushing your hair away. We're getting a fucking book on the shelf, or, you know, like there's
sniping off pieces.
Off pieces, but pieces that are, it's the space between the words, the space between the notes, which is just as important as the words. Sometimes more important than the words.
On that note, you have done a lot of shows that are CW shows, right? Or
done a couple,
kind of in that genre.
The youth.
Yeah, kind of YA.
Like sexy vampires, sexy, you know, scary mermaids, that sort of stuff, right? Like a lot of genre stuff, like cool genre stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So how much is the network involved in like how you shoot the show? Because like they're all shot beautifully and it's all very, very nice, but there is kind of a little bit of like a CW look sometimes, and also the casting. I mean, the cast is just like absurdly good looking.
Absurdly beautiful. Yes. Every single time.
Can you cast some ugly people for me, please?
We try. Trust me, I try. We try.
So does someone like the CW, when you know it's a CW show, are you shooting it differently than if you were to shoot, for instance, a nightmare sequence for Minority Report? You know?
Of course, it's definitely, it's always different. Like I said, every show gives me different requirements. You know, certain shows want 3 sizes of coverage on every single character, a single on every single character. But that's actually the thing, is that like the shows that require me to do, you know, tons and tons of coverage, everything in between, I can do whatever I want. You know, like how I shoot my master, how I do all of my scenes like that. Like I can do anything I want as long as I get those 3 sizes, which is obviously limiting because time is a thing. But then there are shows that, you know, have specific rules and are like really cool. Like, you know, I mean, Doom Patrol's not YA, but, you know, they have like a way they shoot their show that like specific rules on, you know, how they do it. And I try to watch as many episodes as I can going into a series so that I just sort of ingest what their language is and like try to do that. But then like I can't help it. I'm still Amanda, so I'm still going to tell that story the way that I saw it in my head.
And how do you use any cool tools to plan out your blogging, to plan out your shots? Like if you are doing a cool moving camera master, do you diagram it? Do you use Shot Designer Pro? Do you have to show it to the showrunner before?
I definitely never have to show anybody my shot, like if I have a complicated blocking and camera move, like I'll talk to my DP about it, maybe if it's particularly complicated and needs more equipment, and if we're lighting more areas than we were anticipating. But if we're working within the equipment that we're used to working in, then I can kind of just come on and say, this is what we're doing. I do sort of top-down shot maps. Overhead, very, very rough. I just write them on a piece of paper once so that's in my brain. And then my process is the night before I shoot, I go to sleep, and then I think about the scene over and over and over again in my head. And I think about where A camera is going to go after my first setup and where B camera is going to go after my first setup, and how I can maybe marry those into like the same setups. I mean, it's kind of, it is kind of algebraic. To me, like it is kind of like the factors and the variables, like the variables being what I want, like where I want the camera to go, and the factors being the story. And I I don't know. I come up with that depending some scenes it's the night before, other scenes it's weeks before because it's more complicated. But
And so for your strategy, you've been to the location, right? You know if it's on a stage build.
I was going to
or
say
on
you've
set.
you've had like a tech scout with people as well, so you've been able to kind of walk through with, say, the DP and say like, well, what if blocking looked something like this? You talk through the gear with them,
right,
know,
a
all
cool
of that.
direction, or we want the window behind her or something
Right.
here, right? What's your strategy for like setting up a blocking with 7 people in a scene like Nancy Drew?
I mean, it's algebra, but it's like visual algebra. And it's honestly like, it's my favorite thing. Like I love okay, say we've got 2 people, we got a 50-50 shot, 2 profile 50-50 shot. And then character B turns towards camera because he's got a thought, walks towards camera. That becomes his single with the other guy over his shoulder. Then he turns around and it becomes that guy's over. And then he walks past him and then turns around and becomes his over. Like, I love that shit. I think there is an elegance to efficiency. I think there is something about making the camera move around with the blocking of the actors that ultimately makes your edit more fluid, so that when you do cut, the audience doesn't notice unless they're supposed to, at which case maybe you jump the line, or maybe you like jump cut or get to like a much tighter shot. Like, I prefer that you don't notice the cut until I want you to. And that's what, for me, the most beautiful thing that television has taught me is getting something done in a short amount of time will often, if you're smart about it, will give you the most fluid, beautiful shots.
And so when you're kind of creating these beautiful frames and compositions in your mind, you're diagramming them, are you also thinking of the motivation for like why this actor is walking in that direction, why this actor, and then do you have to tell like the actors that, like, oh, maybe you think like you don't want to face him anymore, so you're gonna walk to the counter and just like, grab a drink
actors
of water
don't
or
want to
something.
feel like meat puppets, right? And also, like, if you give them something that feels false,
Like that fish.
yes, like that fish, which was a literal meat puppet, but you don't want to give them a direction that feels false, because everything will feel false. The more context you can give the actor, the more reason you can give the actor to live in the moment and not remember where their mark is and feel like they need to go to that mark, it feels better every time. And if you're doing something that makes the actor feel like they shouldn't be going there, then you need to rethink what you're doing.
It's telling to me that even when you were kind of walking us through this hypothetical, you said like, oh, the character has a thought which motivates their next mark, basically, right? So like thinking through the motivation that compels a character to do these things, I think is maybe the thing that's easy to forget when you're just trying to build cool shots. And it's the difference between making something that makes sense and also that so that the actors trust you, right? Like you don't want them to lose confidence in you either.
That's so majorly important. Ultimately, the characters are what matters. It, like, the story can be cool, you can have a great plot, but if we don't care about whether or not our protagonist survives, then like, screw your great plot. It doesn't matter. Like, we need to care about what they're going through, and they need to feel real. And like, honestly, like when you say something like, a beautiful shot, yes, you can have a beautiful, like, the light is beautiful and the composition is great. Sure, that's a beautiful shot. A more beautiful shot could be one actor against a white wall giving you like the most amazing performance ever. And then that is a beautiful shot. The acting is so important. The visual is something that we as directors do to like enhance that and make that amazing and really bring it home. But if that doesn't work, then none of it works, in my opinion.
I've been thinking a lot, and we've been talking about it a lot on the podcast, of what makes a cinematic show cinematic versus like a YouTube sketch. We talked to someone about that recently, and I do think one of the things is like when you see like a film school short, or you see like an amazingly shot YouTube video that's shot on Alexa and lit with like an 18K, and everything's perfect, but you're noticing that the characters are blocking themselves in a way to create this beautifully composed shot, but you don't quite know why they're blocking themselves like that. That's to me when all of a sudden a show doesn't feel cinematic. Because I was watching, somebody sent us some trailer to their indie film, And it was shot really nice on anamorphic lenses and everything. And then I was watching The Boys, the show on Amazon Prime, which I love. And I was like, why is this shot of The Boys of like a close-up of a person? Why does this feel like so much better to me than a close-up on this shot when they're using similar lenses, similar framing, similar everything? And I think it's what you're saying. It's like the performance in the story is like, I'm with the character and I believe that they're here, you know? And yes, the art direction is great and the lighting is great, but the art direction and the lighting is pretty great in this indie film too. But there's something that feels cheap to me. And
yeah,
I think
it's about the editor and the director making the decision that you should be looking at this shot right now versus everything else we shot. Right now, you need to be with this character. You need to hear what this character's saying. You need to see their face or their hands or whatever, you know? Like, it's about navigating that moment emotionally and then using this visual language that we're all so fluent in to make it better.
Yeah, and it's why a $50 short film can get you a TV career, because you're focusing on something that resonates with people as opposed to just like a beautifully composed frame.
But I mean, isn't that like, for me, at least for me as a filmmaker, like my goal is to, you know, reach other people and touch other people. And it is the most, like, I can't tell you how cool it was. Like the first show I worked on, Shadowhunters, had like this insane fan base, like I have fans. I have like 6 of them. I have like literally like 6 real fans. And they, you know, watched my scenes and you know, like I had one girl send me an essay about like theory about the color in my shots, which was like, what the hell? Like, nobody cares about TV directors. This is like, insane.
Oh, you're right. I am smart. Good call. Yeah.
But what it is ultimately is like you're telling a story. You're telling a human experience. You're telling. I mean, most of the time. I mean, not all movies, obviously, but like
sometimes a vampire experience.
Sometimes
right?
An animal. I don't know, whatever. But like for the most part, we're trying to share human experiences, and that is the end all be all of it. Like you can, like I mean, my entire family are artists. I'm classically trained in terms of like the visual. Like I love the rule of thirds. I love all that stuff. I love color palettes, color balance, all that kind of stuff. But in the end, it is really about the story you're telling and using our cinematic language to take that script, those words, and turn them visual.
Yeah, I do think though. Most directors, even new ones right out of film school and everyone, and I mean, Matt and I work a lot in advertising, and it's like every creative director is like, it's all about the story. It's all about like, you know, like everyone knows that it's supposed to be about that, but then you see these kind of newer filmmakers and they're just so excited by the toys and by the magic hour and by this and by that they get so distracted that it's just really hard to keep focus on.
I think that's fair. I think it's fair to get excited about all the tools and stuff. And like I'll tell you, like even like the fact that you say like everyone says it's about the story, like you're right. Like literally everybody's like it's about the characters, about the story. But if everybody really understood that, then every single TV show would be amazing.
Yeah, and I didn't mean that in a disparaging way. Like I meant that there's people like you that can get past the other distractions, you know, to actually do that, and it's hard.
I mean, I think a lot of it for me at least is like I was a huge like I'm a nerd, you know, like I love Star Trek, I love Harry Potter, I play video games.
Yeah, she's talking to us on a gaming headset right now.
Yeah, like I'm the reason I'm a storyteller is because I'm a story consumer. And I'm just trying to make cool stories for other people that can like enjoy them as much as I enjoy the stories that I'm told, you know? I'm just trying to like build in that universe, I guess.
Yeah, play in that sandbox. And what's great about that also is that you still get to appreciate and enjoy all of the fandoms that you're a part of still. Do you know what I mean? I think it's easy for people to think like, oh, well now like this big TV director, they don't have time to like love the things they used to love. No, I think people love them even more, right? You know how hard it is to make the things that you love then, you know? Like the admiration only grows and like that relationship only deepens, I feel like, over time.
Right. And you want to pass it on. You want what you experienced when you watched whatever, Back to the Future. You want them to experience when they're watching shadow hunters.
Yeah, that's
right?
that's the whole reason I do it. And then I honestly, like, I definitely fell ass backwards into the YA universe. It was never my goal. I was never like, I want to be a YA director.
But you love genre from a young age.
I've always loved genre. I still always love genre. Like,
and YA is genre. It's like genre with very good looking teens.
You keep saying you're lucky, and I think that luck is a thing that we talk about on the show sometimes. I think you did all of the things to set yourself up to be ready for the opportunity that arose. But the thing that is interesting is that I feel like your career has the true luck is that YA and genre kind of coincided as you were coming up. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there was opportunity to do what you love to do the most at the time that you were ready to do it is pretty incredible for sure. But like YA wasn't vampires and mermaids and like or superheroes, you know what I mean? Like the Arrowverse wasn't a thing not that long ago. I remember being at Comic-Con the year that Twilight was there, and it was like a distinct shift in terms of what fandom felt like, and people were mad about it.
That movie blew people's minds because no one was like, oh, you can't make a girl-led teen story and put it in the movie theater. And then it was like the #1 movie for like 5 weeks.
I saw that movie 3 times, and I still can't tell you what happened.
Fair enough. But in terms of like a cultural shift, right, where like it used to be that like Comic-Con was for dudes and like people who care about superheroes or whatever, and that was like the beginning of opening it up to a wider audience.
That's actually an interesting point. Like, I wonder if part of the YA nerdverse has come into such power is because like women were kind of welcomed into it, or like girls were kind of welcomed into it. Like Buffy is like a big one. Buffy was huge.
Buffy's probably that's probably the
Buffy was kind of like an outlier, I think, at the time, and Buffy appealed. It's like a Joss Whedon show, right? I don't think people think of Buffy as a YA show, right? Like traditionally, just because. But
it is literally the foundation of every YA show that exists now. Every YA show is like, like Buffy.
Right. But I think the money that controls like all of Hollywood and what gets made is when they saw that Twilight can get young, very young, like young teenagers to go spend money and female teenagers to go spend money. And it doesn't have to be a horror movie, like, or a date night thing or like a superhero thing, but it can actually be a story that's meaningful to like a different audience than you've ever accessed. I think people were like, oh, wow, this is like, we should stop ignoring these kids that are talking about their favorite books. Right. I mean, Harry Potter, like there's a giant list of books that change things, but I think Twilight is when people realize that, like you said, you saw it 3 times, you don't quite know. It doesn't have to be an Oscar caliber movie to actually have like a huge impact on society if you're talking to this underserved audience, right?
I would argue that Harry Potter did it. Because, like, when Twilight came out, Twilight was like, Harry Potter was like a huge, I remember when that first movie came out and like, I skipped school for the first time. It was like very, it was, I wore a costume. It was like very, very exciting. Like I had never cared about anything that much before in my life.
But you were at an age where your parents had to take you to see the movie. Right?
No, I was not that. I was 16, 15. I saw it by myself.
Really? When the Chris Columbus one?
Yeah, I was in high school. I was in grade 9. But I would just argue that like I think Harry Potter was like the beginning of it, and then Twilight was the like confirmation that like, oh shit, this is like a real thing. I think that YA is, at least the shows that I work on, have tried to and are conscious of the people we're speaking to. Not all of them, but most of them. And I think that now, at least a lot of the television that I'm making is influenced so heavily by the people watching it because they have Twitter, they have voices, and they can say that we don't like this, we like this, you should be showing us this. And you're actually, because of the internet, seeing what you're watching changing because of what the audience feels.
Right. And you're also learning that those shows are appealing. And I think, to me, why Twilight is different than Harry Potter is because Harry Potter is like, you took your kid, like kids, kids go to see it, but Twilight is about people that are making their own decisions and
Are
spending
you
their
a Twilight fan? I'm
money.
getting this
Like,
vibe.
Yeah. I think the point is that like there's a lot of cultural things that all sort of shifted together to all of a sudden mean that there was a lot of genre YA TV happening when you had the exact right resume for it.
Right, but also like Amanda is saying, we also realize that like YA isn't just 16-year-old girls. It's like actually 45-year-old women, and it's 25-year-old men, and it's like just so appeals to so many more people than was traditionally thought of.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting because like if you like, so when I was in school, for example, like there's literary fiction versus genre. And literary fiction is always sort of regarded as like the fancier, the more highbrow. Genre is always kind of like lower brow, pulpy. Whereas I've always been of the opinion that if genre requires metaphor, world building, layers, context, like social relevance, genre is so much more like layered and intelligent, I think, than just basic literary fiction. You could take any, and that's the thing, is like any basic literary fiction story can be turned into a much more complex genre story. And I think
Jane Austen and zombies.
Yeah, I just think like maybe the world is recognizing, I think that genre is making a big comeback right now because there's just so much more to it, like. And if you have it's a combination because like I was saying earlier, like you still need those basic human emotions. You need that story. You need that reality, that truth for it all to be grounded in. And then when you add all of these like fantastical elements that can help you relate it all to your situation in a way that's more palatable because you can picture your depression as a dragon or you can picture your abusive husband as a zombie. It just makes it's like a spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I have one last question. I know we're kind of running out of time, but so now that you've been doing this for...
So when Edward said to...
Yes, so Team Jacob... I have done a lot of Twilight related work. I'm not going to lie.
That's awesome. I love that.
So now that you've basically your entire career has been doing cool genre TV shows, and that you started in 2011, right? Like 9 years ago, a slightly different time than it is now. What do you see in TV now? And especially now being also a producer on TV and not just a director, what do you see as... Like if I'm a young listener listening to this show, I'm finishing up film school and I want to be a TV director and work in genre and do these things. What do you think are important stepping stones, or do you have any advice to people that want basically to kind of come up in a similar way that you did, but by 2020 standards?
Yeah, make everything. Don't think your first film is going to be your opus. Like your first film is probably going to be shit. Like just make stuff, make mistakes, make bad things, because every mistake is a brand new lesson that you've learned that you're never going to do again. And filmmaking is so much about doing, and you don't need equipment. Please do not invest in that fancy camera. Do not invest in those fancy lenses. Do it on your iPhone. Like I said, somebody against a wall giving you a great monologue can be a great film. Literally one shot.
Wait, but you don't. But if you could have like a cool hallway or a window or something,
sure,
do that.
Yeah,
instead,
right?
right?
Obviously, like put all of your thought into everything, but embrace your limitations. That is my like. I wish I could have that on a T-shirt. Embrace your limitations. They are a part of your color
Have
palette.
you heard of T Public?
You can have just shoot it on
I'll
a
get
baseball
one and
cap
I will wear
if
it.
you'd like.
We should make an Embrace Your Limitations T-shirt.
Oh, that's good. We should.
Straight up
That's a great
embrace your
idea.
limitations, though. The best thing you can possibly do as a filmmaker is look at the limitations you have and use them as a color on your palette. Oh, your mom has like a really cool living room, and you have your one friend who like can play an angry guy really well. Write something to it, shoot it, see what happens. Just use the tools you have, do it all the time. Don't expect anything from it. Just work on yourself as a filmmaker, because chances are, if you keep doing it, I mean, not chances are, this is again, I'm talking about algebra, I'm talking about math. If you make enough mistakes, you will be good, and you will be so good that even if you don't make an award-winning film, even if you don't become mega famous, you will have the skills and you'll have the proof that people will hire you.
And do you think you should show people all these things that are mistakes, or is...
No.
Oh, really?
No. Be very selective about that. I have, like I said, before Mitten, I have probably hundreds of films, and I could recognize when I'm like, that is not good. We're going to keep that one.
Let me ask, how did you recognize? How could you tell? Especially when you're younger, because it's like, I really worked hard on this one. I really liked the idea, and I know the microphone wasn't really working the way it should have, but...
Oh, well, first of all, actually, this is a very important piece of advice. Like I said, if you have someone standing against a wall and you shoot it on a high-8 tape and the lighting is terrible, if your sound is bad, then you're done. Sound is really, really important. Get good sound, learn how to do good sound. That is the first thing that will take you out of anything. A bad shot won't necessarily. But how to recognize whether or not it's good, I don't know. Sometimes you just know. And it's also about you have to let go of your ego. It has to not be about you being a great filmmaker, born and raised. It has to be about you being a great filmmaker because you've taught yourself to be that person. It's a craft.
Well, Amanda, we could talk to you for days and days, but we should let you go because you are prepping a big TV show soon. Before we let you go, though, can you hang out and endorse with us?
Yes.
Unpaid endorsement.
So my unpaid endorsement is the Instagram of a fellow producing director, Nicole Castle, she was the producing director on Watchmen. And she recently posted a bunch of different slides from the pitch deck / lookbook that helped her get that season of Watchmen.
I am going to be jealous.
And it is great.
How do you spell her last name? Because she is definitely not the Nicole Castle that I just looked up on Instagram.
Kassell. It's super cool. She, it's got visual references. It's got all of the writing that she did on figuring out how to make the show look and feel the way it does. And she's been posting them kind of slowly over the last couple weeks on Instagram, but I think she's done now. And they're all up there on her Instagram. Nicole Castle is her name if you search for her on Instagram.
My thing recently has been, I haven't really been able to sleep. I've had, anxiety, pandemic, all that kind of stuff. I have 2 recommendations under the same guise of things that will help you sleep. Okay, so it's all on YouTube. Jeff Bridges has sleep tapes where he's literally walking around his farm and he's like, there's a bird out here. It's a nice bird.
Yeah, man.
And he's got that deep gravelly voice and he'll be you know what?
And he doesn't realize they're sleep tapes.
Oh, probably not. They're probably just just messages he recorded on his phone or whatever. But he's just you know what? There's people out there that love you. Don't worry about it. If you're thinking about that, don't worry. It's just so soothing and amazing, and an amazing thing to fall asleep to. And then the second thing on YouTube as well.
Wait, so are you watching it or you're just listening to it?
They're just sleep tapes, and there's 10 of them. There's 10 hours of Jeff Bridges just rambling on his property in California. And
it's the real Jeff Bridges. It's not like an impression.
It is actually Jeff Bridges.
It's not Josh. It's Josh Rubin.
It's not Morgan Freeman.
Just go on YouTube, Jeff Bridges sleep tapes.
Oh my God!
And you will have the best sleep of your life. And then the second one I have, if you are a fan of Star Trek, there is a 24-hour loop of just the engine hum. My life is currently changed because of these 2 extraordinary sleep aids, and I would like to give them unto the world.
Well, those are great endorsements from both of you. Might as well give up now. I was going to endorse the weirdest thing of all time, which is, so I've always had this weird thing when I wear glasses, my skin gets really dry on my face. And recently, because we're all wearing masks all the time, and especially when you're on set wearing a mask for 14 hours or whatever, just my face just gets really, really super dry. And I've tried I know nothing about skincare really. And I've tried all these lotions that you can buy everywhere. And then I just saw this commercial for CeraVe moisture cream. Everyone was started reading and doing all this research and doing reading a bunch of reviews. And then I bought this stuff, and it's the only thing that works for me after I'm wearing a mask. And Now my wife uses it also, and it's like if you're having a crazy dry face from wearing a mask all day on set, check out the CeraVe Moisture Cream. It's like changed my life. I literally was like having like skin flaking off my face, and this is the only
Man,
thing.
guys, these are unendorsed, but you should get them endorsed. That was a great advertisement.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Amanda, where can listeners learn more about you? How can they keep track of what you're doing, what you're making?
Well, I'll be completely honest. I'm not really an internet present person. I do have an Instagram. If you want to look at my 35 millimeter photographs, because I'm a 90-year-old man, you can look at my Instagram, arrow.photos. Other than that, I urge you to
arrow.photos.
Arrow.photos.
Like a bow and arrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Arrow.photos is my Instagram.
And what about hello Amanda Rowe? Is that
I mean,
not a thing?
that's going to be my new podcast, guys. You'll be my first guest.
There you go. There we go. It's a
And then
crossover episode right now.
If people want to watch your Nancy Drews, you're in
Nancy's
co-EP
Drew.
on all
Nancy's
of
Drew,
the second
sorry.
season?
Oh, the second season. I directed 2 episodes the first season. Please, go to the CW app. Season 1 is free. I urge you, if you're a filmmaker, you want to get into television, Larry Tang, who set the tone for that series, talk about not shooting coverage. It's actually very interesting, and it stands out, and we embrace the supernatural, the horror of it all. I'm very proud to be on this show, and I think it's a little underrated, and it'd be awesome if some of you guys checked it out.
And you're saying watching the show is a great lesson in not shooting over too much
It's a
coverage.
great lesson in how to shoot 7 people with one setup.
I will watch it.
Awesome. Well, we will have all of the things that we talked about on the show in our show notes at justshootitpod.com. And you can learn more about and be reminded of all of our great new episodes coming out across all social media at Just Shoot It Pod. And I am at Mr. Matt Edmo.
And I'm at O'Kaplan on Instagram, at SmiteyPyleg on Twitter. And if you have any questions, we love to hear from you. You can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. And the music you're listening to is from the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amanda.